Richard, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues. The papers you're about to hear about have been the result of over 2 years of work by an extraordinary team. We've tried to pull together all the available data on HIV and sex workers from the epidemiology, the disease burden, prevention, community empowerment, the human rights elements, and very importantly, I think, with separate freestanding papers on men who sell sex and transgender sex workers, because, of course, the issues for those populations are so distinct and so important. I want to say that every one of the papers in this series, of the 6 papers and the call to action paper, have had members of the sex worker community as co-authors. That is really critically important. And as you'll see as you go through the papers, there are the voices of people on the ground, sex workers, woven throughout the narratives of the series. But in addition to that, this is the first Lancet special issue that has included a community member as one of the guest editors, and that is really participation and a real advance. In addition to the 6 comprehensive reviews and the call to action, there also are 5 commentaries in the series. I really would encourage you to look at those. And those commentaries include, of course, one by the Lancet editors, a commentary by the guest editors of the series, who I'll name in a moment, on dispelling myths around HIV and sex workers, an important commentary on underage people, led by Craig McClure from UNICEF and a group of youth leaders, who, of course, we understand the critical role of youth and adolescents in this area, and then a piece on the whole issue of trafficking, human rights, legal and policy environment, which again is such an important area for us to look at scientifically. And for those of you who are more scientifically inclined, there also are substantial modeling components by several different groups of modelers, and you'll see some of the modeling outcomes as we go through the talks. Before we begin, I want to just thank my really wonderful team of guest co-editors on this series: Stephanie Strathty from the University of California, San Diego, Jenny Butler from UNFPA, Anna Louise Crago from the University of Toronto. Indeed. And Linda Gale Becker from the University of Cape Town and the Desmond Tutu HIV Foundation. This series was supported by grants to our Center for Public Health and Human Rights at Johns Hopkins, from UNFPA, from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and from the Center for AIDS Research, the NIH-funded center grant at Johns Hopkins. And we are, of course, deeply grateful to all of the funders for these activities. I want to particularly thank someone who is not here. The senior editor who worked on this series with us, Pam Das, was unable to travel, but happily we have had senior editor Selena Lowe with us, working with us in support of this. And finally, just before we begin, I do want to say a special thank you to Richard Horton. He actually suggested this series and has championed it all along. But I think, for me, the extraordinary thing about Richard is, in addition to making the Lancet really such a great global health journal, as we all know, he really has looked at science and the scientific endeavor as a way to better human lives and to really make a difference. And I think that that's what this series is all about, and that's what the Lancet is all about, and we all really appreciate your leadership. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Stephanie Strathty from University of California, San Diego, who's also the Associate Dean for Global Health at UCSD, to kick off. She was one of the co-authors of the first paper, which is on the risk environment and epidemiology, and the lead author of that paper, Kate Shannon, is just about to have her second child, and so Australia's a little bit far. Stephanie. Well, friends, It has been an incredible journey. I think I don't have to say to you what an impressive group of scientists and community leaders have done this work together. I think we got the gender balance right with the authorship on these papers. People talk about empowering women in science all the time, but I gotta say.
And what a cover.
Cover.
Thank you, Richard.
In conclusion, let me just say that I think it's very clear from the work that you've seen and from all of these papers that this is a critical area of undone work in the response to HIV. You have all heard, and we've heard throughout this meeting, the rhetoric of stepping up the pace, of coming to an end to AIDS, of the 390s, of thinking about how we're going to do this and end AIDS by 2030. If we can't do better, and with and for these communities, we are not going to get there. I think that is abundantly clear. And so what I'd like to do is invite everyone in this room and all of you in your communities and networks to join in this effort to be part of this struggle. Sex workers are really a critical part of the HIV response. They're our partners, they're our colleagues. They're absolutely central to the next phase of dealing with the HIV pandemic. And of course, as you've seen, they also face a range of other issues, most unfortunately consistently across male, female, and transgender sex workers of violence, human rights violations, and abuses, which aid and abet the HIV epidemic, but which in and of themselves are unacceptable in 2014, and that's got to change. So please join me one more time in thanking all of these extraordinary authors for all of their work. Let me also thank again all of the co-authors who've been a part of this Lancet series. It's an extraordinary group of people.
And thank you, Chris.